Hi, welcome to this video on connecting our UI to the activity so that we can learn how to respond to user events. So let us again revisit our UI. So this is our UI. We have this start game button at the bottom. We have the score for left and right thumb, the left and right buttons, the status of the game, and this is the player name where we are going to show which player's turn it is. So let's start with the simple way and then we'll see the more advanced way on how we can connect the UI that we have written in XML to our activity code that we've written in Kotlin. So at the top of your class, just after the declaration and before the onCreate method, write private late init var start game button. Its type is button and leave it. You might have to import the button class. So private late init var. So as we discussed in Kotlin, var is a variable, and because we are writing it outside the methods, this becomes a member variable. Now as we remember from Kotlin classes that any member variable has to be initialized at the start itself. But here we have used this late init keyword. This will tell the compiler that this variable will not be initialized during the declaration, but before it is used, some value will be provided to it. And private is just the modifier used to denote which classes can access it. So once our layout is set, what we can do is start game button is equal to find view by id r.id.button start game. So if you control or command click on button start game, we'll go to our start game button. So we have initialized the variable which will hold the instance of the start game button, and using find view by id, we are asking Android at runtime to find this button in this layout and assign it to this variable, our start game button. So this is how you find and initialize the UI elements at runtime. We will do the same for our player text view. This is type text view, and I'll duplicate this. Player text view. So now we have instances of both button start game as well as the player text view. So we are able to map the start game button at the bottom as well as this player text view at the top. So just to demonstrate, what we are going to do is we are also going to add an event handling. So we'll also do this the old way first, and then I'll show you how to do it the more recent or advanced way. So we will write start game button set on click listener this. So what we're telling is whenever a click happens on the start game button, this class which refers to main activity is going to handle it. Now this will give you an error telling that currently there is a type mismatch, which means that main activity has not implemented this method. So if you click on this red bulb here, you can choose let main activity implement interface, and then it will also provide you the method. So this method is here. What we are going to do is whenever the user clicks on player on the start game button, we will check if v.id is equal to r.id.start game button, then okay, double equals, then player text view dot text is equal to so we'll just assign the current time of the Android phone in milliseconds. just to ensure that every time we get a new time to display. So now if you see, this is not giving an error. So let us run it. So now every time I click start game button, you can see that this text is getting updated with the latest time in milliseconds. So I can even debug it for you and show you. So this is how we attach a debugger point, and then we choose the process. This is our app. So our debugger console will open and you will see this line connected to the target VM, and this is the address. So now if I click start game, you can see behind that the Android Studio view has changed. It will show you where the debug point is, wherever the execution has stopped, and you can even debug the variables there. So you can even evaluate expressions. So you can check what is the ID. So ID will generally be stored as integer. So you can say this is integer. If you want to see the text, start games. So we can make out that this is our button. So the button extends from TextView class. That is why I was able to do it. You can also do it as this. What I'm doing here is I'm casting this view as a button and then using the text parameter on the button to print what is the text of the button. So let's stop debugging and go back to our class, remove the debug point. So this is the old way of handling click listeners or the clicks. The problem you see is that we have one method on click view which is coming from this interface. So every time you attach a new click listener to any event, all those callbacks will go to this on click method. Or you have to initialize an anonymous class inside this, like this. So either you have to do a lot of anonymous classes or you need to handle the IDs in one on click method. So to overcome all these problems, you can actually attach the function directly in XML. So let us clean up our code a little bit. We don't need all these methods. Let's just write function on start game button clicked view. Okay. Now if you go to activity underscore main.xml and go to split or code and go to your button, you can actually type on click and you can see that our method has already been listed here. So I can just select it. Now going back to main activity, I'll remove this on click listener that we've added through code, and I will move this code to our new method, remove this listener, remove this interface that we had to add, and now let's run it again. So as you can see, it still works. Every time I press start game, the numbers are changing. It is the latest time in milliseconds. Now you see that in our UI, there are so many elements. So this one play text view, then this play start game, then these two buttons, these two text views, score text views, and this last button. So almost 7 elements. So if I start writing find view by ID for all the 7 elements, I'll have to create 7 variables and then this find view by ID 7 times. So this is quite cumbersome. So for this also, Android has come up with a new functionality called view binding, which is part of Jetpack library, where all these bindings are taken care by the library itself. So to enable that, we have to go to our build Gradle file. So open up your Android pane in the project and look for build.gradle module. thumbfight.app, not the project build Gradle, but the module build Gradle. Double click. So we have these Android features where all the Android specific properties are defined. In that, you need to add one more, build features, and inside that, view binding true. And now you just need to press on the sync now. So the Gradle files will run again and they will try to import the view binding libraries. So I already have those libraries, so it is fast for me. Then what you can do is, before you go back to main activity, rebuild the project. Okay, so our project has compiled again. Go back to main activity. We don't need these now. Don't bother about the errors. Just write private var binding colon activity main binding. So this will also be late in it. Now, instead of doing a set content view using activity underscore main, what we'll be doing is so what is happening here is once we enabled view binding, all the layouts became eligible for this view binding. What this will do is it will generate this activity main binding on its own. Okay, so if you go to your project pane, go to app build and intermediates, then Java C, debug, then go to your package data binding activity main binding. So any layout that you have, so if you see our layout was called activity underscore main, so Jetpack will use the same nomenclature and create a class for you, a binding class. If you open this class, you can see it has already picked up all the layouts or all the view elements that had an ID. So you don't need to do a find view by ID. It will already have all those UI elements as member variable. So we can use that directly. It will also have a root view which will specify the full layout. So instead of setting the content view to the layout, what we are doing is we are inflating it using the layout inflator, assigning it to a variable, and then using the root view to set the content view. So let us go back to Android. So now I don't need to do a find view by ID for start game button or even for play text view. But what I have to do is I just need to do binding dot play text view dot text, and I should be able to run my program again like before. So you can see it still works and I have to write much less code than before. So we have 3 buttons. So let us add functions for all the 3 buttons. If you remember, we have left thumb, and we also have a right thumb. And then let's go to activity underscore main and assign them. So this is the left thumb, on click, left thumb button clicked. This is the right thumb. So on click, on right thumb button clicked. With this, we have connected our UI, which is written in XML, to our code that we are writing in Kotlin, and we are ready for the next phase. So let us stop the video here. In the next video, we will start writing the logic, which will actually help us run the game. See you there. Thanks for watching.